played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Boom to the hey, all you sports fans out there in the two-ball sphere, or to you, the individuals, part of this collective. Welcome to the OMSR Gen 5.0 with your brief but very concise, even when words said thrice, host Will the Alternative ESPN Sports Thrill. Had to double check that goalie shot. After all, that's the one position I played and excelled at in soccer. Never scored on as a goalie, but that was a long time ago. Doing the intro show, ding-a-ling-a-ma-jing. Little examples, some snapshots of the highlights coming up. Part 3 of 3, the after effect. So we got a nice little time capsule coming up here. Take us from some various news sources. It's all about the politics of FIFA, as opposed to some of the sports punditry some of you may have heard from or seen from some different sources. Not sure what your political viewing habits might be, but as I would say, technical difficulties on the OMSR set. You know, when you're 6'3.5" and 240, you tend to kind of, and you got 6'7" guy limbs to boot. You're bumping in size 15s. Oh yeah, it's been a lifelong struggle of trying not to bump into stuff. Always having to walk. There I go again. Walking, bumping into stuff and or people. Excuse me, don't mean nothing by it. Anyway, yes. Various news sources. Interesting stuff. I tend to defer to MSNBC and midday CNN due to a lot less political, not so much spin, but focus from CNN. MSNBC definitely a little bit left of center. International most wanted list from Interpol, 62 to FIFA, but regarding, their handling of soccer revenue, wow, It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And she's a well-known gal, women's soccer. There at the end. Majority of the highlights to come at the end after the sport rant of the segment, which is going to be about, the segue takes us from how when you get too comfortable, getting too comfortable in one's own position, sooner or later it comes back to bite you in the butt. Taking the set. I cannot monitor everyone all of the time. Got a great closing clip from the Star Trek film. Sort of emphasizes, the dude at the top. Maybe we're getting back to the regular normal. I said on part 2 in the sport rant. Pushing the boundaries of the new normal. And you saw one of the original graphics from the OMSR back in the day, Gen 1.0, and a few of the Pi Kappa Alpha styled house cheerleaders. View, chapter Alpha Tau, giving you props. And of course, Dwayne Darnett's Ultimate Sports Fan, the OMSR mascot. Darning that ain't a lot. You can bet. Darn that FIFA, been getting away with this for decades. Why did it take the U.S.A. so long to lower the boom? Why couldn't some other countries who are more pro-soccer have done this? Makes you wonder about the whole, legal structure in terms of the reach. United States jurisdiction internationally as opposed to other countries who are in the soccer dome, as we all know. Alright, so we're going to egress out of here into the main feature of Gen 5.0, which is the Will in a Box. Down here in the corner, low profile, low drag, high speed, as opposed to Jack in the Box. Definitely give Jack in the Box a run for their money when it comes to shoving up some sports themed grub. Absolutely. Back in my days, chef / kitchen manager before and during college a little bit before I I got caught up in bartending and bar managing, which had its definite pros and cons going on there. That's why I have that dedication at each description. Those of you in those particular industries, been there, done that. All right, so sort of like your political and or sports commentator on the lowdown down here. All right, let's roll it. Now, this is taken from the weekend. This is what he was saying after he'd been elected unanimously.
Cannot monitor everyone all of the time. If people want to do wrong, they will also try to hide it.
And that was Sepp Blatter, the president of the International Soccer's governing body, FIFA, evading responsibility this week for allegations of corruption involving the organization that he heads. Seemed to be a persuasive argument to the folks who work with Blatter. He was re-elected yesterday as the president of FIFA by an overwhelming margin, although he did go to a second ballot for that. Early Wednesday morning, police officers have been swarmed in one of the fanciest hotels in Switzerland to arrest 7 FIFA executives gathered for a week of meetings. They would culminate with Blatter's re-election. 14 defendants in all from all around the world now facing charges here in the United States involving more than $100 million in bribes and kickbacks.
Our investigation revealed that what should have been an expression of international sportsmanship was used as a vehicle in this broader scheme to line executives' pockets with bribes totaling $110 million. Nearly a third of the legitimate costs of the rights to the tournaments involved.
And in what might be the most blatant allegation, a former FIFA executive is accused of shopping his vote for World Cup host to the highest bidder, eventually accepting, it is claimed, $10 million from South Africa. That is the country that was awarded the 2010 World Cup. And this allegedly is how business is done in international soccer, or how it was done until U.S. officials decided that they'd seen enough.
The game, according to the allegations in this indictment, was hijacked. That field that is so famously flat was made tilted in favor of those who were looking to gain at the expense of countries and kids who were enjoying the game of soccer.
And the indictments may not be over yet. The 2018 World Cup in Russia, the 2022 World Cup in Qatar weren't mentioned in this week's charges, but U.S. officials say their investigation is ongoing. Blatter equally defiant this morning in the wake of winning what he sees as a referendum on his leadership, questioning the timing of the charges in an interview with Swiss television, saying, quote, "I am not certain, but it doesn't smell good." Also expressing his surprise at what the U.S. Justice Department is alleging, quote, "Of course I'm shocked. I would never, as FIFA president, make comments about another organization without being certain of what has happened." Times like these, we like to turn to Mike Pesca for guidance. He's sports contributor to NPR and the host of the Slate podcast, The Gist. Mike, thank you for joining us. So let me ask you like a bigger picture question here. We always talk about soccer as that one major sport that this country, the United States, has never really latched onto, but around the world, it's the most popular sport. So when the United States is leading the charge against the international governing body of soccer, how does that look to soccer fans around the world? Are they siding with prosecutors here in the U.S. and saying, good for you, go get these guys? Or are they saying, does the U.S. have any business doing this?
Well, it depends who the fans are and how informed they are. I mean, across Europe is with the United States, and I don't know that Europe had the muscle or the laws. I mean, United States is a leader in the rule of law. And so all of Europe, they are even threatening to withdraw from FIFA, and the president of, the president of UEFA, which is the European Federation, has asked him to step down, Sepp Blatter, who says that he's shocked about what's going on and also that there's gambling in Casablanca. But yeah, I don't think that any informed soccer fan would at all be surprised. But of course, we're talking about, since it's the world's game, there's a lot of corruption in the world. I don't know that most of the world's population, which is to say most of the world's soccer fans, say something like, well, isn't this the way power works?
Well, was there something, though, about, awarding the World Cup to South Africa in 2010, even if there was corruption at that, I think a lot of people around the world just looked at it and said, well, that's a nice symbolic statement that South Africa's come so far. You can give them this. Was a line crossed maybe in terms of public opinion with giving it to Qatar? Because Qatar, it sounds like the worst possible place climate-wise to host the World Cup.
Right, and I was at the South African World Cup, and this was, without the allegations of bribery on the table, people were saying, what a great job, and it's great for Africa. And you get to a good point. point, the African nations love Blatter. It's one of the reasons why Blatter was so overwhelmingly reelected. And when I say nations, not always nations, like Montserrat and Macau, these little principalities, have as much of a vote as Germany and the U.S. So yeah, he satisfies his constituency of these tiny, small nations. But you're right. So they give it to Qatar, and they give it to Qatar in the summer originally. Everyone's looking around going, how in the world did this happen?
I mean, it's 122 degrees.
Yeah,
so
right?
A quick question, and I mean, so, you know, the prosecution's taking place now, maybe more indictments to come. At the same time, Blatter re-elected. Do you think, big picture, a year or two from now, things will have changed, or is it still going to be status quo?
The thing is, there's no real bona fide reformist movement where you can identify with a person. I mean, Prince Hussein, Prince Ali, he stepped up and he said, I'll run, but it's not like he has, it's not like he has this long history of this. In the IOC equivalent organization, there's the old guard, there are reformers. I think there are more forces for good who could plausibly be elected and take power. FIFA, it's, you know, Grant Wall, best U.S. soccer writer, said it's a little bit worse than the Elks Club elections.
Those could be fun to cover.
Also known as the sports rant takeaway, this-away type deal. All right. So here in part 3, the final segment, 3 parts, expose, put together by yours truly, the OMSR. So now we're up to full speed, real time. And I was going to go with the what happens when you get up to those levels of eccentricities. You know, certainly the committee member there in New York having an apartment for his cats. That's back on part 2. And it's also going to be discussed again by the gal, U.S. Soccer, coming up here, Wendy. Closing highlights. But I think I'm going to segue back to the discussion of why soccer isn't as big here in the U.S. And I'll tell you, because a lot of us dudes who played basketball and football, still do, also did the soccer thing. Youth soccer, huge, depending on which state you're at, but popular throughout, absolutely, especially at the 10 to the 14-year range. But it's a very hard sport to practice on your own, certainly, because the logistics involved. What I mean by that is just plain simple distances. You get a basketball, out on the court, you can practice by yourself. You're pretty much in and around the ball. It doesn't take that much time to retrieve it. Football, you get at least one buddy you need, obviously. A couple buddies tossing the ball around, running routes, practicing, you know, running, coming off the ball. If you're one of those bigger kids, you're just going to be slated for the line, down the line in your life, the collegiate, or high school or collegiate level. But if somebody fumbles the ball, drops the pass, so forth, it's not that long to get it back. Soccer, you have to practice at full speed, otherwise why bother, right? So you and a buddy are out there on the playground, somebody's being the goalie, so you could practice. Whomever is the practice is intended for, if not both, then if one guy kicking the ball, the dude practicing shots, he's a halfback or forward on his local team. He's got to go at full speed. So his other buddies practicing being the goalie, ball's going, you know, 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, every time. Pretty soon after a spring or fall of practicing soccer this way at that age, I can personally tell you, all of us sort of get like fed up with it because you're spending, if you're out there for 2.5, 3 hours, an hour's worth is spent retrieving just the soccer ball. Now I know it sounds silly, but at that age, we just want to get as much time in recreational as we can before the mom starts, you know, you gotta get home now before it gets dark. Straight up. All right, plenty more highlights coming up. That's my theory, at least. Thanks for watching. No silly DUIs while you're out there, reminding you sports and alcohol, they are joined at the hip while you're celebrating the NBA Finals. Roll clips.
A week ago, he was untouchable, the head of the most powerful sports organization in the world. But tonight, in an absolutely stunning turn of events, Sepp Blatter is stepping down as president of FIFA. Just 4 days after he was elected to a 5th term, and just 6 days after the Justice Department handed down a 47-count indictment against 14 people associated with FIFA, including 9 FIFA officials, alleging widespread corruption in the organization. It was unclear last week whether that investigation stretched all the way to the top. Tonight, we found out it does, as Sepp Blatter stood at the headquarters of FIFA today to announce the organization needs a profound restructuring and that he was resigning his position. Law enforcement officials confirmed he was a focus of a federal corruption investigation. Joining me now, Jeremy Schaap, the host of E60 Reports on ESPN. And Jeremy, when I had you on the program last week, I felt that basically the implied was that Blatter's not going anywhere. He probably will escape this. The guy's the Terminator. Look what happened. Amazing.
It is. I don't think anyone who would tell you right now that they saw this coming would be telling the truth, Chris. In fact, the last line of the show we did about Blatter said, the most powerful man in sports answers to no one. Well, it turned out I was wrong, and I think many people were wrong because it seems that he's answering, in a sense, to the federal authorities in the U.S., to the federal authorities in Switzerland. The circle was coming closer, and certainly the people around him were enmeshed in this and up to their eyeballs in this. And I would have to imagine, although we can't say this for a fact, but it was that mounting pressure that led to the extraordinary events of today.
Well, it certainly looks that way. New York Times reporting today that he, too, is a target of federal investigators, and obviously they're the ones, American investigators and Swiss investigators, have made these collars. I mean, you got to think that's front of mind.
Sure, and we said, 3 weeks ago on ESPN, we reported on E60 that because of that federal investigation, he had decided that it would be unwise to set foot on U.S. soil. So, it's not a surprise in the big picture that the federal investigation would be leading to his doorstep. But it seemed that he thought he would be able in some way to ride this out. It seemed that way as recently, of course, as last Friday when he was overwhelmingly reelected to a fifth term.
If you were betting on the stock of Qatar World Cup 2022, that stock took a nosedive today, don't you think?
Well, I think that's very much the case, and Greg Dyke, who runs the English Football Association, said that if he were running Qatar 2022, he wouldn't be sleeping very well tonight, or words to that effect. But remember, it is a very, very long process to actually move that World Cup out of Qatar. We're talking about a revote. There are provisions for a revote under the FIFA charter, but you would have to assume that somebody would be running against them, that somebody would defeat them. If there were a revote and Qatar were running again, there's no guarantee they wouldn't win. And the procedures have changed. It's not just an executive committee vote anymore. That's a body of about 24 people typically, although sometimes some people get suspended, and at this point the executive committee is a few men short because of arrests. The vote is moving to the full 209-member Congress. And remember, I'm not sure that countries that wanted that 2022 World Cup, who lost it, would be interested in getting a World Cup that has been tainted now. They might see as damaged goods. The countries that are interested, I think, would rather probably just wait for the 2026 bidding, which is to take place in 2017, Chris.
All right, Jeremy Schaff, one of my favorite persons of interest, host of E60 Reports, ESPN. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, the criminal probe is expanding for FIFA, World Soccer's governing body. Today, Interpol issued red notices to 2 former FIFA executives and 4 marketing executives for charges including racketeering, conspiracy, and corruption. This must be Chicago in the 1930s. The red notices are the equivalent of placing the officials on an international most wanted list. This comes just a day after Sepp Blatter resigned as FIFA president, a stunning turn after winning re-election Friday for a 5th consecutive term. Joining me now is Joe Prince-Wright, lead writer and editor of NBC Sports Pro Soccer Talk, and we're also honored to have ESPNW analyst and writer Julie Foudy, former captain of the U.S. women's national team and one of the most accomplished female soccer players in the world. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Luke.
So start with you, Joe. What do we know here in terms of what happened over these last few days to get Sepp Blatter to resign? It seemed the investigation kept going closer and closer to his inner circle.
Yeah, Luke, that's it really, because on Friday, as you mentioned, he was only re-elected for his 5th straight 4th-year term. And then 4 days later, he's walking away. So there's been something's gone on behind the scenes there. What was the final straw that broke the camel's back? We're not quite sure. But it's a combination of things. There was pressure from big sponsors about the corruption allegations. And then Jerome Velke, his right-hand man, he was involved and mentioned in a $10 million bribe, the FBI calling it, from South Africa to FIFA officials. That was paid back in 2008. So yes, it's gone way back to Sepp Blatter's door, the FIFA president, and he's not there anymore. He's resigning. We've still got 6 to 9 months until he officially leaves. But now there's one big mess that's got to be sorted out, and a new man's needed to clean up FIFA once and for all.
Indeed, and Julie, I've often heard your commentary and that of Alexi Lawless that FIFA will be inherently problematically corrupt until Mr. Blatter is gone. What does it mean for the governing body and for the sport overall that we're kind of in this purgatory? Because ostensibly he is in charge if he wants to be, it seems, until, granted, we might have some legal ramifications, but until early next year. How does the sport grow and change if he's still at the helm, even in an interim basis?
Well, at least they're taking the right step forward, and there was a lot of rejoicing, as you can imagine, Luke, in the soccer world yesterday with the news that Sepp Blatter was going to step away, because literally people thought it would take grabbing him and getting him out kicking and screaming to have him resign. So that was a surprise. So I think that's the first step. I think the second thing is even though you have this weird 6-month gap where Sepp Blatter is still in charge, you have to start looking at reform in so many different areas, because it's just not one man, of course. This is a culture within FIFA that is legendary. And the hope is, in the soccer community, that you just don't replace the face and have the same old FIFA. You actually have a full restructure.
And when you say the same old FIFA, I mean, it is really old and outdated. You've seen these remarks before. I want to read them a little bit. Blatter said to a Swiss newspaper in 2004, let the women play in more feminine clothes like they do in volleyball. They could, for example, have tighter shorts. Also, you have the Women's World Cup, which is being played now in Canada. Look at some of these pictures of the legs of the women. They're all torn up because of this awful artificial turf that they have to play on at the behest of FIFA. Just when we talk about the corruption's one thing, but you have the World Cup to Qatar. This is actually, it's a detrimental impact to how the sport is played, that the players have their legs scraped up because of this absurd behavior. I mean, what is going on there?
Well, that was a lawsuit, too, that the many U.S. players and international players tried to fight FIFA on to get the Women's World Cup off turf. In the end, the timing wasn't going to work for them, so they had to drop the lawsuit. But that is add to the list of reform. That's one of the things that is also the legacy of FIFA, is they're putting the Women's World Cup on artificial surface this year, which in itself I think is crazy. But you hear so many stories of, if it's Chuck Blazer, the American delegate who was essentially wiretapped and had a turn for the FBI and gave a lot of this information. He had 2 penthouses in Trump Tower, one for just his cat. And then you hear, in the same breath, you hear about women's teams from Trinidad who come to the United States for World Cup qualifiers and can't even afford meals because their federation has given them no money. So I think the list is long. It's going to take a lot of time, but it's going to take a whole cultural shift.
Certainly. And Joe, real quick to you to finish up the discussion. The United States is not often thought of around the world as a soccer powerhouse by any means, but how is the international community reacting to the fact that the U.S. actually took the lead in rooting out FIFA, something that many people have wanted to see worldwide for decades?
Oh, the U.S. is the most loved soccer nation in the world right now. It's euphoria that the FBI has tried to bring down FIFA, and some people have been trying to do it for years. 17 years Sepp Blatter's been in charge. He's been the incumbent. He's been untouchable at times, but now he's resigned and everyone loves the U.S.A.
Or I cannot monitor everyone all of the time. If people want to do wrong, they will also try to hide it.
Your men being the order, shot the Chancellor. Objection. I cannot confirm or deny actions I did not witness. Captain Kirk, are you aware that as the captain of a starship, you are required to be responsible for the actions of your men? That if it should be proved that members of your crew did in fact carry out such an assassination. Jim, they're setting us up. Your Honors, do not answer. Captain Kirk, you will answer the question. As captain,